Hey BookTube, it's Bag. Welcome back to the History Shelf. Today is a Monday Reads, and I'm going to be talking about some of the books I'm currently reading. A book I finished, and books I'm about to begin that I'm a little behind on. But let's start with the book I finished very recently, and this was Denaturalized, How Thousands Lost Their Citizenship and Lives in Vichy France by Claire Zalk, and it was translated by Catherine Porter. This was put out in 2020, just late last year, by Belknap Harvard University Press. And this was a very fascinating study. It was a very targeted study, and it's a work of history and translation. So I found that kind of interesting as well, just the writing. But it talks about the controversial law that the Vichy regime passed on July 22nd, 1940, that required a review of all naturalizations that had preceded the Vichy regime. And over time, as Claire Zalk was investigating, noticed very much a targeting of Jews. And she says here in the introduction that she had to really, to find this story, she had to go through files and read the history from the actual naturalization forms and all the handwritten notes. It was like a detective story in ways, how she was trying to follow the thread, the logic of why certain people's naturalization paperwork and their status was under question. And as she lays forth in the introduction, the July 1940 law was silent as to the criteria that were to guide the commission's work. So what happened in July 1940 is they set up the Commission for the Review of Naturalizations, but they didn't leave any of their records behind. So she's saying they could have been destroyed during the war. In any event, those files have never been found. Sources for information about the workings of this commission, its deliberations, the recruitment of its members, or its relations with other agencies are virtually non-existent. So imagine how hard it would be to just look at actual naturalization files, looking at what was scribbled on them, and trying to tease out the tendrils of, a story of like what happened. I mean, and that's what Claire Zalk did. She plunged into a pile of these files that she found, and she kind of looked at the law itself. Takes a broader view of the naturalization policies of France prior to that, and then ties in how the Vichy regime kind of, turned it on its head really, and makes the case that they probably felt pressure from, the German occupation to find Jewish people that were naturalized and to find a way to denaturalize them so that they could be deported. And where. So it is a very sobering read, very stark, and I think this book is very valuable in that it adds to the Robert Paxton's work, which I actually want to dive into, but it kind of lays out, she kind of mentions him in the introduction. Robert Paxton wrote a huge book on Vichy France, which I want to get my hands on. It's pretty pricey, but I'm waiting for the right moment. Maybe as a birthday gift or something, I'll ask for it. But I want to get that study. But she says even in Robert Paxton's study of Vichy France, the history of denaturalizations under Vichy regime is limited. He only devotes a few pages to it, she says, based on investigations carried out during the purge trials, and on the German archives, showing that the initiative behind it was French and the ambition driving it was anti-Semitic. So in her introduction, she kind of lays down her argument juxtaposed to the work that has previously gone forward from other historians, Patrick Veal, Robert Paxton. So, I mean, the bibliography is extensive. The notes are extensive. Again, a history work, translated, but I think translated very well. Of course, I don't speak French, but it was very readable. The book itself is very meticulous. So, if you're a fan of just very mainstream general histories, this book might be a little too much for you. But if you're really interested in the topic of just naturalization in general, status of immigrants and people trying to attain nationality in different countries, it's a worthwhile read to see how it was mishandled in the Vichy regime and how complicit the Vichy regime was. Some of the interesting notes that I took from this book, and I've really got my notes and my tabs throughout. Trying to implement a naturalization review policy, it took a bureaucracy, and then it took people having to enact it on a local level. What was heartening is that we see when they were tasked with going to the local mayors to find the people they were targeting, which was mostly Jews, that the mayors on the local level were really hesitant to cooperate with the Vichy regime. And I highlighted this little snippet here because it plays on the importance of just people knowing each other in community and how that really can stop that bureaucratic steamroll from crushing people. It's the human part, the connection that people have in a community. And she says here, the denaturalization procedure, when it took place on the local level, brought into play criteria that had less to do with the political stances of the mayors than with the social and economic ties woven locally between dignitaries and naturalized citizens. For many of these mayors, it was less a matter of resisting orders and of defending the citizens in their charge. So I thought that was like a bright light in an otherwise kind of dark book about the Vichy regime and just how awful this law was. I mean, imagine, and she points it out very poignantly in the letter. There's a chapter on protests, how people who would just had been in France, they had been naturalized for 8 years or more. I mean, just any number of years, waking up to a knock on the door or a letter saying your citizenship has been revoked. Please report to the appropriate department to find out you need to get out. So it upended people's lives. It destroyed their careers, or took away their livelihood. And then how it affected families. I mean, they would try to revoke a citizenship of a parent, but they may not touch the child, or they might touch the child and not the parent, and it just kind of ripped families apart. And the letters of protest, pleading for them to reconsider. And I've been a good French citizen, and my employers can attest to this. I mean, it was really heartrending reading, but Claire Zalk does a great job of that in that chapter where she kind of quotes extensively from letters that people wrote. And a lot of times, the only time things might be overturned would be if there was a personal connection to someone who was working on the commission of the in that department. So usually personal connections could get someone a reprieve, or get their naturalization renewed. She talks about the different types of causes or the reasons why people were denaturalized, at least according to the Vichy regime. Things such as national interest, whether people are a good Frenchman or not. There was a whole section on just having to, like, what makes a good Frenchman? But I mean, it wasn't anything defined in the actual policy, so it was very arbitrary, and punitive. It says, let's see, let me get to the attesting that one is a good Frenchman. In support of their protests, the writers contesting denaturalization supplemented their texts with a set of documents intended to prove their membership in the national community and thereby to inflect the decisions of the commission. And she gives a lot of individual examples. So she's looking at people's actual paperwork. She's in those files and she's pulling out these people's paperwork by name. And then she says that paperwork that they would submit with tons of people's signatures attesting to their status as a good worker, a good citizen, a good neighbor, churchgoer, someone who had military service under them, military records from like World War I and how they served faithfully. And they say that statements from employers predominate. But they seem to have carried no weight with the judges. So that's, that's sad. But the book is replete with these. She's got these wonderful photocopies of the actual files, and you can see the handwritten notes in here. I wish I could read French, but it's all translated here. And again, it goes back to. Predominantly, a lot of Jewish people were targeted by this, unfortunately, and a lot of people were deported and sent to concentration camps as a result of this horrific law that was passed on July 22nd, 1940. So overall, this was a very studious read. It's very academic. It takes as its jumping off point the exploration of physical files in lieu of archives. Files meaning the actual, again, I know I've already said it, but just to reiterate, the actual naturalization paperwork. She's looking at the scribbles, the scrawls, and trying to tie in that along with previous French law, the story of how this all came to be, and also the Vichy regime's capitulation in many instances to the pressure of the German occupation to serve up as many Jews as they could find, denaturalize them so that they could deport them. So she highlights that. It's full of pathos, especially when you hear the pleading of the people who are like, it was so unfair, it was so wrong. But I think this is going to stand as a wonderful contribution to the study of Vichy studies. It's very targeted just on the naturalization process, very much on the Commission for the Review of Naturalizations that was created in 1940. And but I think this will be a wonderful complement to Paxton, who I do have his book on fascism, but I want to get his book on the Vichy regime. So Denaturalized, Claire Zalk, by Belknap Harvard Press. Got that last year for review. I did enjoy it. I learned a ton of stuff. And again, as you know me on the history shelf, every book I read tends to take me down a rabbit hole, and I want to learn more. And I'm going to be starting with Paxton's work, and then the bibliography itself in this book can take me down a rabbit hole. Sorry about that. So, okay, let's go on to the next book that I'm reading now. Well, I apologize for that, everybody. That was Gidget saying hello and bossing me around. So I had to take care of that. Anyway, so let's moving on to a book that I'm almost finished with. This is a buddy read with Bill Rutenberg at Bill Rutenberg's library. Together we are reading The Zealot and the Emancipator. John Brown, Abraham Lincoln, and the Struggle for American Freedom by H.W. Brands. I've got about 40 pages left, and I should finish it tonight or tomorrow. It's a good book. It's a good book. I have to say, I think And I'm hoping Bill and I can do just a Zoom chat on this. If anyone's interested, we might just discuss this book a little bit more in depth. But just my initial reaction is, I think, I've read, and I have so many of H.W. Brand's books that I think when I got this book, it was out of like a loyalty purchase. Because, and just like Bill Rutenberg, I mean, he has read so many books on Lincoln. He's a high school, history teacher. You know me with the Civil War. I mean, I've read a ton on this topic already. So, it's not like I've learned a lot of new things. It was mostly about seeing how he framed it and how he framed the two. John Brown is not in this book as much as Lincoln is. And that's just because his life was cut short, sure. But it has caused me to rethink some of Abraham Lincoln's decisions and whether he was a bit too slow with the Emancipation Proclamation, which I think he was. But I'm still looking at, I'm still reading, trying to see where his argument, which side he's landing on. Right now, he's just putting it out there very objectively, but the quotes he's using from Lincoln juxtaposed with Frederick Douglass, and how Frederick Douglass was really castigating him for, like, why are you placating these slaveholders? They're already in revolt, like, what are you're not going to win them back. And I have to agree with Douglass. I mean, there's times where I'm just really frustrated with Lincoln. But, hindsight is 20/20, but it's like the point in the book where I'm at, they're already in the second, third year of the war. And it's like, stop already. They're not going to come back, Anyway, but I've gotten to the point where he's issued the proclamation. But I have to say, I think I bought the book because it's like, oh, H.W. Brand's new book. I'm going to get it. I enjoy his work. So, it'll go up on the shelf. But I think I might, next time, if anyone writes a book on John Brown, and I already have another book on John Brown that I want to read called The Good Terrorist, which I think that is a very provocative title. I'm very excited about that. I think I'm just going to kind of avoid things I've already read so much about, because there's so many books I haven't read yet about things I don't know a lot about. And you know me, it's all about learning something new. So otherwise, though, it's a pretty good read. I'll tell you when I'm done. I don't want to review it right now, and I'm still 40 pages away from the end. But anyway, that's my first, my first take on that. And what else am I reading right now? Well, I'm past halfway through on this. This is a book that I will be reviewing for BookBrowse Review. I'm sure you've heard me talk about BookBrowse Review. I write for them. I'm a reviewer with BookBrowse Review. I can leave their link below if you want to check them out. Really thoughtful reviews, lots of different features on their site, book clubs, first impressions. It's a great place to find your next read, or to learn more about a subject, beyond the book and stuff. But I am reading The Spymaster of Baghdad, and this book is coming out on February 21st. So I think they're sending me the finished copy right now. But I'm working through my my advanced copy. So, The Spymaster of Baghdad: A True Story of Bravery, Family, and Patriotism in the Battle Against ISIS by Margaret Coker. She was the former Baghdad bureau chief for the New York Times, so journalist with a lot of credentials. I'm flying through this book. It's really interesting. It's about this little, not a well-known group of Iraqi nationals, who came together to form a little group called the Falcons, who were spies, and found ways to combat the extremism going on in Iraq during the 2000s, and they juxtapose it with the two brothers, Munaf and Harith, are the ones who work with the Falcons, and they're struggling to stop terrorist attacks. And then you have a radicalized young woman, university-educated scientist, who is radicalized and wants to, use her knowledge of chemicals and everything else to help out ISIS. and she comes to, want to do her own type of terrorist attack, and it's up to them to foil her. I haven't gotten to that point where I've gotten to the point where she decides to do it, but it is a page-turning account for sure. And anyway, I'll be writing a review for BookBrowse review, so that's due in February 15th. So I'll be finishing that up soon. Oh yes, the other book I'm finishing up, I still got about 130 pages, but very small type. So it's, yeah. But wow, is it fascinating. This is Soviet Judgment at Nuremberg by Francine Hirsch, a new history of the International Military Tribunal after World War II. It's put out by Oxford just last year. I think just in the fall of last year. And it talks about the Nuremberg trials. It talks about, you get a glimpse of all the different prosecutorial teams, but mostly it does focus on the Soviets and their experiences there in how they were attempting to, prosecute. This was really this trial was the first of its kind, really, where the winning side of a war put on trial, military leaders, industrial magnates who were Nazis or associated with the Nazis, and tried to find a way to put on what they call a fair trial without crossing over into the victor's justice, what they call victor's justice, where which was what the defense would claim a lot. Well, you're just, there is no chance for a fair trial here because you won the war and you're just going to hang us anyway. But she talks about the Soviets and just how they were really just not used to a Western-style trial. Of course, they were used to show trials where, you'd have someone come up, then you'd have the lawyer come up and say, did you do this, this, and this? And people were like, yes, yes, yes. And, they never understood what, like, cross-examining a witness could mean. Like, you actually would have to be prepared to know that the defendant would defend themselves. And so it's just, it's a wonderful history of just trial, trial history, and how the criminal justice system worked on an international level, and the difficulties they came across, and just having to, like 2 judges were British, 2 judges were, Russian. How many times could a defendant be cross-examined, without, delaying the trial so much so that it was getting ridiculous. I mean, I'm at the point in the book where it's already been happening for 6 months now, and the defendants were having their say. But I have to say the chapters on how Hermann Göring just played them is wow. I didn't realize how much of a show that guy put on, but he kind of ran rings around the prosecutors, and he got away with a lot of stuff. Robert Jackson, the chief prosecutor for America, the United States, was just like telling the judges, you have to stop them from these speeches, and trying to deflect and trying to say, but you guys did bad things too, and so it's a really just a fascinating story of trial history. And then the difficulties specifically for the Soviets dealing with how to avoid the sticky matter of the German-Russian non-aggression pact, and also the massacre of Katyn, because they wanted to put the massacre of the Polish officers in the force of Katyn onto the Nazis. And, they fabricated a bunch of evidence. They had some fake report, the Burdenko report, and the Nazis were like, "No, we have evidence that it was the Soviets." And so, and Jackson and the Allies, the British and the French and the Americans all knew it was the Soviets, right? But they had to we were still allies at that point, but we were definitely coming apart, and you can feel the Cold War starting in this courtroom. And in the Palace of Justice at Nuremberg. So it's just really fascinating. I'm really enjoying it. First coming to this book, I was like, wow, this is going to be kind of heavy, kind of dry. It's not. It's not. She talks about how, she kind of mixes in some of the social stuff that happened between the people in the courtroom, the press. In fact, I found a lot of really cool references to, journalists who were covering the Nuremberg trials that reminded me of previous reading that I'd done on these people, like Janet Flanner, Rebecca West. These were all people who were there writing articles for their newspapers or magazines back home, or their diaries or journal entries. And so, in fact, I went and I was like, I remember Janet Flanner, she was one of those ladies from the Paris on the left bank kind of stuff. So I decided to hunt down some of her journals, and I'll show that in another new books or used books that I've purchased. So yeah, there's references to journalists, writers. Again, you know me with the rabbit holes. I can go forever. Really good book. So, yeah, I'm about 130 pages away from finishing. I have another reminder. Okay. All right, so continuing on. I'm reading right now my Christian studies, the Incomparable Christ by John Stott. I'm sure many of you who are Christian or enjoy just well-written, kind of studies on Christianity or the Christian life know of John Stott. Right now, I am kind of it's a book that kind of takes the reader on a view of Jesus from 4 different aspects. The original Jesus, which is the New Testament witness to Jesus in the Gospel, Acts, and letters. The ecclesiastical Jesus, which is the part I'm on right now. And he's talking about how the church has presented him from Justin Martyr, Benedict, and Anselm to Thomas à Kempis, Luther, and Jefferson, up until, late 20th century or mid-20th century. The influential Jesus, how he inspired people from St. Francis to Tolstoy. And the eternal Jesus, how he challenges us today through 10 visions from the book of Revelation. So I'm really enjoying it. I'm making lots of notes throughout, doing my usual underlining. It's okay, because I plan on keeping these books, I'm really enjoying his, he kind of breaks down the ecclesiastical Jesus, so he introducing... Well, I've heard of these guys, but I think I might want to explore their writings, like Justin Martyr, Anselm. I think I want to read Anselm. I have The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, which I need to read, but Bernard of Clairvaux, and just really cool stuff. So it's intellectual, but it also takes me back into the Word. So I'm enjoying The Incomparable Christ by John Stott. Another thing I'm still reading, I'm reading the book of Jeremiah in the Bible right now, and I usually like to read a book that I'm studying along with a commentary, and I have the entire set of the Bible Speaks Today, the BST series, both the Old Testament and new ones, and so I pulled this off the shelf to accompany my reading of Jeremiah. Well, Jeremiah is a huge book of prophecy and warning and all this kind of stuff, and I thought I would have a bigger commentary than this. And I have to say, I'm not impressed with it, because other books in this series I have read, they will give you like at least a more in-depth discourse on certain passages, and this is very, very very brief, although there are parts that I like, and I'm highlighting, and good stuff here, and but for like a very large portion of the book, the commentary may only be 3 or 4 pages, and then and so it's like for an entire long chapter of prophecy, I kind of wanted more, and in fact, so I was happy to receive this. I'll show this again in my other. Oh, where is it? Well, I have a book, new books in the mail video coming soon, and there's a new book out that actually so timely. It's on the book of Jeremiah, giving it more of a historical, setting it in its historical, place and time, and then extrapolating out from that the spiritual and the biblical lessons of it. So, and it's a brand new book from IVP, InterVarsity Press, as you know, is one of my favorite presses. So actually, I'll show that in my other video because I'm getting long on time here. But so in the meantime, I mean, I'll probably will finish this, but it's really it's kind of a little bit too shallow for me. I kind of want more for a book of Jeremiah's like heft. I want more exposition on it. I want more, more insights. But so I'm hoping the new book on Jeremiah that I got will help in that regard. Okay, and then the next two books are books I'm about to begin, and I'm sure you all know I'll be reading this one here beginning next month for reals. But I want to start getting my toes wet. We have a live stream that will be airing on Christy Lewis's channel, I believe, Dostoevsky in Space. I will link her channel below. I'll link everyone's channel below who's on this read-along. Our first live stream will be on Thursday. I think it's 7 p.m. Eastern. So check it out. But we will be reading in the months of February, March, the Brothers Karamazov. There's so many different ways you could pronounce it, I guess, by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I have my Everyman's Library edition. And my translation is the Pever and Volokonsky. So I'm excited. I'll probably start just reading chapter 1 tonight in bed, all nice and cozy. Oh boy. So I'm a little bit behind on this for another buddy read. Kim Becker at middle of the book march. Please forgive me. I will try to catch up to you. She's trying to read a third of this book. A third of the book every month, so January, February, March, is the massive biography on Thomas Cromwell, A Revolutionary Life, Dermot McCulloch. And I just hauled this not long ago, like a week ago, I think, from Hamilton Book. So I should probably be about at least 200 pages in by Sunday. Okay, that's not going to happen. But, I want to get in. I want to read enough so that I can have something to chime in with on the Voxer, because we're doing a buddy read. Middle of the book march, Seriella, Albert Seriella, and Noel at the Book Rook. And so anyway, Thomas Cromwell, I got to get going on that. I got to get cracking. But I think once I finish the Emancipator and the Zealot, I'll be good. Once I get done with this big hefty tome, I'll have more reading time. Oh, and then what else, of course, am I reading? I've got a ton of journals and periodicals, so I'm reading all my new Criterion. I'm reading my first things. I just got my January 1st TLS the other day, but what's funny is I got the 8th and the 15th before I got the January 1st. Isn't that funny? But I'm reading TLS. My kind of like, I call them like intellectual journals, but they're like cultural journals. But they have like art, philosophy, history, music, literature. These in themselves, when I'm reading a bunch of these, wow, it's a mental workout, but very uplifting, very rewarding. And of course, my history magazines, which are just piled up, and foreign affairs. I have a lot of journals. My journals, I could read my journals probably just by themselves, and I wouldn't need to read a book all year, but that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Okay, guys, well, that's my Monday reads and current reads and recently finished, and I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. And yeah, until next time, guys, take care, and we'll see you later. Bye.